Hey Computer, play About Bees podcast.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back once again for another rousing episode of About Bees, Culture, and Curiosity. This is Ron Miksha. Our co-host, Bedzina, will be joining us in a little while. And meanwhile, we have a real treat for you because we've been able to get Daniel Miksha, the philosophy major from McGill University, back in here. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It's tough to get you. So, you're a busy guy. You're finishing your school year.
I'm finishing my school. I'm on my last semester. It's kind of surreal actually, because I only have 3 lectures left in my entire undergraduate degree. So that's a little frightening, but it's also a little exciting. So things are
Oh,
things are
that's
wrapping up.
very exciting to have 3 lectures left. Are you missing one right now while we're recording?
Oh, no, no.
Okay, okay. That's fantastic. So you'll have your philosophy degree, and then do you have any plans afterwards? Like, are you going to take a few years off?
No, I'm jumping right into it. I'm going to UBC, so other end of the country here,
Wait, wait,
and
wait.
I'm
UBC, like this is a B podcast. So what's the B
uh,
stand for? And
uh,
UBC. I
well,
think
in this
most of
case,
the listeners, yeah, most listeners won't know.
the B stands for British in this case, but it's
Oh,
the
you're going to
University of
London,
no, it's the
Harvard.
University of British Columbia. So that's in Vancouver. And that's the biggest university in kind of Western Canada. And they've got
Oh,
a very good journalism program.
they
So
have a
that's where
very
I'm going
good
to be headed.
everything over there. I've heard they have a
Yeah, it
very
is a
good
very good school.
everything. Yeah, so
So
you're following up your philosophy, which kind of focused a lot on, well, both early philosophers like the Romans and more Greek than Romans, the Greek philosophers, and then you also were really interested in the 18th, 19th century German philosophers.
yeah, that was kind of it's funny because I structured my degree so that I more or less followed the arc of intellectual history. So more towards the beginning of my degree, I was doing a lot of the Greeks, so particularly Plato and then Aristotle, doing a little bit of later Greek philosophy and then transitioning into medieval philosophy, which oddly enough, I don't know how many people would expect this, but I think the most difficult class I've taken in philosophy and hardest to wrap your head around is early medieval philosophy. It's
No, even
incredibly complicated.
early medieval, like that. So
Yes.
this is, so you actually didn't, I was thinking like you went from ancient Greek to directly into um like 18th century, but you
No.
didn't, you had medieval philosophy too. And that was even more difficult to wrap your head around, as the youngsters say these days, than you had classes in very abstract logic early on.
Well, here's the thing is that I did take a class in logic. It wasn't terribly abstract. It was reasonably down to earth. But the thing about early medieval philosophy is we don't really think about this because when we think early medieval, we think kind of I don't know, maybe people in cloisters and kind of meditating and praying all
Right.
day. And all of that is
Exactly.
true. But what they were meditating and praying about, oddly enough, was the foundations of logic and the foundations of knowledge. So, in fact, the you have all this abstract logic that we have to learn, like
Oh,
nowadays about
wow.
predicates and stuff like that, which kind of undergirds mathematics. But the
Right.
people who are trying to figure out the even more abstract foundations of logic were these medieval monks. Because think
No
about it, you
way.
have a whole bunch of very intelligent, bored people stuck up in a cloister. What do they have to think about? They're going to start thinking about, well, first off, they're going to be reading the Bible and they're going to be reading Aristotle. And they're trying to harmonize the two. And in their
Oh,
attempt to harmonize the two, which are often very contradictory, they ended up essentially distilling the foundations of logic as we know it today. So and that is, oh my God, it's so complicated. It is horribly,
I
horribly difficult.
I guess
Um,
so. I guess so. So these people, these complicated cloistered monks who were reading Aristotle and the Bible, uh, you think a lot of them were non-believers who were trying to just figure things out so that they can become believers?
no. The thing is the idea of there being believers and non-believers is a very recent phenomenon. It's the way I like to think about it is imagine asking if somebody today, like today, we're having a conversation and say, imagine I ask you, oh, are you non-linguistic? Do you use language? Of
Ooh.
course you use language. You can't avoid
Oh,
using
okay, I do.
language.
The answer is yes, then.
Yeah, the answer is yes. And
Thanks for
it's
answering
funny
for
because
me.
it's really only around the 18th century that the idea that you can exist without religion starts to enter public consciousness. It was never something that even came up. It was so ingrained in the rhythm of people's lives, the way that language is so deeply ingrained in the rhythm of our lives, that it would never have even occurred to people that there's a way of existing outside of the social and linguistic and psychological frameworks produced by the church or
Mhm.
organized religion at all for that matter. So this is
Right.
all from the work of Charles Taylor, by the way. This is one of his
Oh,
big
shout out to
pieces.
Charles.
Shout
Okay,
out to
Dr.
Charles Taylor.
Charles Taylor. Tell me a little bit about Dr. Charles Taylor, and then we'll start talking about our main theme, or the thing I really wanted to talk about today is going to be, as soon as we get a little more groundwork behind us, is going to be the idea of, no, it sounds really strange, but happiness in bees, in insects, in animals, in humans. What, how do we define happiness? And can that concept be applied to bees? So that's where we're going to head. But I do want you to just mention Charles Taylor just a little
Of
bit. He's supposedly one of the best philosophers, or the most, I don't know what the word
He's one
would,
of the most influential living philosophers for sure.
influential.
And
Good word.
interestingly enough, he's Canadian. He's born and raised in Montreal, and he taught at McGill for many years. He studied at Oxford. And he's an incredibly influential figure, and one of his big ideas or works, his work mostly revolves around secularism and secularization. And he's also a political philosopher, and he actually wrote a book called Canadian Idealism, which inspired, quite literally, Jack Layton to pursue politics, who's a big NDP politician in Canada for a long time before he passed away from cancer. So he's really a Canadian intellectual powerhouse, and I'm lucky enough that he's very old. I think he's 91 or 2 right now, but he still
Why does
occasionally
his
shows up
age
to
make you?
lectures.
Oh, this is the lucky part because he occasionally at age 91 or 2 or 3 or 4 shows
Yeah,
up
yeah.
at lectures that you actually had sightings of the
Oh, yeah, and
influential, famous Dr. Charles
yeah,
Taylor.
yeah, and I've talked to him a couple times, and
Oh,
it's
no.
quite fun because sometimes we'll have a guest lecturer who comes in and gives a kind of an interesting lecture, usually adjacent to Charles Taylor's work, because there's almost a school of thought that's kind of formed around him. And it's really fun to
So,
get to sit
so
there and
what
see
would that?
him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like this is like a spotting of a rare animal. So,
Yeah.
what is this school of thought that's peculiar, particular to Charles Taylor?
Um, he works on secularism, and
That's my
in the
long suit.
90s, you're what?
My long suit.
And what is that?
That's what I'm good at. Like being a
Oh, yeah.
secularist is yeah.
No, he works on secularism, and basically he tries to come up with the origins of secularism, of how this became a thing. The
Oh,
idea that we
because like
can,
you said just a few minutes ago, that during the medieval times, it would be unthinkable. Like it just wouldn't
yes,
be, just you wouldn't, it wouldn't occur to you that you could be non-linguistic.
yes, yes. And so how did it
Hmm.
become thinkable? And then how did it spread and what's it like? And the
Hmm.
reason this is so interesting is because there was a somewhat naive narrative in the kind of 2000s that secularism is somehow inevitable, that it's going to kind of just wash over the world. And if only everybody was rational, religion would disappear, and and secularism
That's
would
what I
kind
read
of
in Dawkins' books.
and Dawkins would be exactly the type of person who kind of
The
held this idea.
quintessential 2000 secularist.
Exactly, exactly. And a
Okay.
lot of Charles
Mhm.
Taylor's work actually happened before Richard Dawkins, or kind of in tandem with it.
Okay.
But one of his arguments is that secularism is a phenomenon that is essentially an outgrowth of a form of Protestantism. So if you look at the Protestant Reformation, you had Catholics who had churches that were full of all sorts of icons and images and
Hmm.
very structured masses, and that began to break down with kind of a protest that, listen, we don't need images to mediate our connection to God. We don't need a liturgy to mediate our connection to God. We don't even need buildings to mediate our connection to God. And so the idea was, and actually there's a German mystic named Meister Eckhart who said something like, why would you think that God can be constrained in the communion or God can be constrained in the four walls of the church? Like, do you think God might get lost and suddenly hide in your closet or under your bed? So there's this idea that there's nothing human we can do to constrain where God is. So there's no
Hmm.
point of building churches. There's no point of, well, there was for community purposes, but like there's nothing about how we can regulate the presence of the divine in this world. So this affirms kind of a radical freedom of God.
Hmm.
Um, and this taken to its extreme. So then the Protestants, they shifted their focus to the word of God, which is immaterial, it's linguistic, it's the Bible. That's the sola scriptura of the Protestants. So scripture alone is the only way we can encounter God. So there's no need for ritual, there's no need for icons. But if you take that idea to the extreme, the idea is that, well, not even the word of God can constrain God. God is beyond language, God is beyond all that. So this essentially gives way to a form of secularism, where there's nothing we can do to constrain God. So there's no reason to even read scripture. There's no reason to even engage with these ideas in kind of a direct sense. And so
Well,
that,
yeah, I kind of lean that to
yeah.
appreciate that because, you know, the culturally Christians, the Western Europeans for the most part, and their various offsprings around the world, they have one set of scriptures, but that's not the only set of scriptures that people have conceived of
Mhm.
around the world, including the unwritten scriptures of some of the Aboriginal people in different parts of the world. So a lot of people have different ways of identifying their understanding of the sacred.
The funny thing is that your very thought that many people have different ways of and this is a very
Hmm.
kind of Taylor style idea, but like
Okay.
your very thought that, oh, many people have many ways of interpreting scripture is in itself grounded in a radical form of Protestantism. So that in itself is a form of a belief that every individual and every individual group has its own way of having an unmediated access to the divine.
Okay, I
And
can
so,
accept that it's grounded in the Protestantism, except for one very important fundamental difference, and that is that I think that they're all baloney. And the Protestants were a lot different from that. They had so many different Protestant sects that they did not go to war against. I mean, they usually went against the Catholics more than anybody else, but they were reasonably acceptable as long as you go to church. I don't care if it's a Methodist or United Church, or if it's a Southern Baptist Church, as long as you're going to church, then so that's the Protestant ideal, but it's limited to that realm of what's coming out of their interpretations. Individual looks at individual ways of looking at individual interpretations of the Bible itself.
mhm. Well, I think the thing is no matter what, so what's really interesting, there's a religious scholar called Mircea Eliade, who was a Romanian historian of religion. And
Okay, I
he
never heard
wrote
of him, so he's probably not important, but go ahead.
Oh, you've heard of him because you bought me my 3-volume version of his works for my birthday when I turned 16 or something like that.
Oh,
But
okay. All right.
yeah.
I never read him. I don't know anything about him. I
No,
was just
he's
instructed. I mean, you could have instructed me to buy the complete works on Batman or the original Superman comics, but no, no, you had to have this 3-volume set of some
yes.
Romanian intellectual philosopher who was trying to reconcile religion with humanity.
Well, he was trying to produce a history of religions. So he was
Mhm.
kind of the tradition that believed, and some people still believe that there's kind of a continuum in the development of a religion, from something very kind of primitive and primal all the way up to usually Christianity. And this is kind of an evolutionist view. But the interesting thing that I want to draw our attention to is that the way he opens his entire history of religion is he basically said, if you're a monkey sitting in a tree, you can move up or down the tree, you can move left or right, and you can move forward or backwards. But you have to find some way of figuring out which way you should move. And to figure out which way you should move, you have to have a conception of what's valuable. And so the idea is in his mind, the entire history of human religious systems is attempting to develop a finer and finer language that will help us articulate what's valuable. Because if you're a monkey, and maybe this is a good segue actually into whether or not bees can be happy, but if you're a monkey, you have to identify what's valuable, and that's probably going to be food or a mate or safety. And so you're going to move in that direction. You're going to pursue it. But sometimes it's less obvious. Like, what if it's raining? And so you want to stay at home and be warm, but you're also hungry and you need to go out and get food. Somehow you have to balance a set of things that are valuable and harmful. And as social groups develop, because if you're a monkey, you're living in a troop. If you're a bee, you're living in a hive. Determining what's valuable becomes incredibly complex. And so we develop language to communicate with each other about things like danger, danger. And if you're a bee, you're going to create a language to communicate by wiggling your body what direction honey is, which is, or not honey, nectar, which is valuable. So we create ways of communicating value within a group, but because as we become more social, it becomes more and more difficult to actually pinpoint what's valuable. We need to develop what are essentially proto-religious structures or languages to both identify value in our environments and also coordinate behavior within the social group to attain the thing of value.
Got it. I'm
So
following you. I'm
yeah,
pretty much
so the
yeah.
point is when we have this knee-jerk rejection of religious traditions because of
Mm-hmm.
past harms, what we don't
Mm-hmm.
realize is that all these past harms are just a part of a great struggle between groups to identify value and try to figure out how to coordinate behavior to get it. And guess what? Languages can misspeak, languages can be wrong. But it's far too simplistic to say, oh, we should just sever at some arbitrary point the line between what is and isn't religion and say everything before this caused problems, everything before this is much, after this is much more rational. Because there is no such line, because again, even our very secular worldview is a continuum out of a Protestant tradition. And it is this tradition, including our modern secular form, that whether we're conscious of it or not, is constantly trying to articulate what's valuable in our environments and how we can pursue it with others.
Okay. I think we're gonna take it from there. Bettina
Okay.
is about to join us,
Oh,
so
perfect.
we'll
All right.
switch more with an emphasis on bees.
So what I was talking about, just to summarize, is that um, there's a Romanian historian of religions who believes that the origin of religion can be found if we look at the way animals try to move in the world, because animals can move in a lot of different directions, but they have to somehow decide, including us, they have to somehow decide which direction to move in. And when you choose what direction you move in, you're basically saying, you're basically picking something of value in your environment. So you spot something valuable in your environment and you want to move towards that thing. And this could be you move physically. You could move if you're a human by using your words to position yourself towards getting the thing of value. But somehow we have to identify objects of value in the environment. And so what I was saying is that bees do this too, in that bees have certain things that are valuable in their environment, such as nectar, and then they can use a waggle dance to communicate with each other about where that thing of value is. Now, I think one
Okay.
of the most, yeah, go ahead.
I do want to interrupt you because one of the fundamental things that you said is that the monkey or the bee are deciding. Now, I'm going to suggest that nobody decides anything.
It's all impulse. Yeah.
well, impulse, and it is, we do not have an independent will to decide or to think, "Ah, I think I'll do this." I think it's all basically pre-programmed, preordained, if you want to be Calvinist about it. It's all
Mhm.
part of we have no choice. We decide to move left or right, not because we sat there and thought, which way should I? Well, maybe today. It's not, I think it is not like that, but it's rather the cherries are ripe over to the right. And that signals to me the smell, the color, the distance signals to me that that's the direction I'm going to go. And I have no choice in the matter.
I think that's probably the direction that neuroscience is tending in. And I think that's probably true. That if you're a monkey in the tree, you don't you may it's a question of whether or not you're aware that you're making the decision, but you have a strong internal urge to follow the marks of red in the tree because evolution has taught you over millions of iterations of life and death that if you give in to that urge and move in that direction, you're more likely to survive and reproduce. I think that's very true. I think the mistake that some people then bleed into is thinking that means that nothing matters.
Oh, that could be me.
That could be me. Actually, this is really funny because very recently, I think it's all how you frame it, to be honest. Because
Okay.
very recently I was reading, actually, it's right here. There's this fantastic philosopher. This is the first time, actually, just 2 years ago, that his work was translated into English from German. He was not very beloved in the English world, but he wrote a book called Ideas for the Philosophy of the History of Mankind. And his name is Johann Gottfried Herder.
Hmm.
And Herder had this like really interesting reflection that I flagged. And his main idea, and this kind of bleeds into what we're talking about, is that in the German-speaking world, things you can study are divided into two. There's the Naturwissenschaften, so knowledge of nature, and there's the Geisteswissenschaften, which is knowledge of spirit. Hello, Benzina.
Hello. Okay, but sorry, yeah, Dausch
No,
spirit.
no, all good. Yeah, yeah. So there's knowledge of nature and there's knowledge of spirit. And his idea is that the two are essentially a continuum. There's no clean place to cut it. So humans kind of go from being a part of the natural world to having kind of ideas on their own. And there's no kind of spark of the divine that kind of sets in you. This is all one big continuum.
Okay, so
And what
Herder was just translated into English a couple of years ago from his
yeah.
German. When did he pursue these ideas? They sound a little dated.
This is the late 1700s, I
Oh,
think.
okay, that very dated then. All right.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Thank
yeah,
you.
no, no. These are the
Late
late 1700s. Let
1700s.
me actually see
Mhm.
if I can get an exact date for
No,
you.
I don't need the exact date. I just was curious about whether he was giving us these ideas very recently. You never
No,
know with
no, these
philosophy.
you never know, but no, these are older ideas for sure. But what's really interesting about that is that he conceptualized nature as basically being a series of forces that kind of push upwards in terms of complexity. So he said that rocks have kind of these chemical bonds inside of them, which are a form of force. These chemical bonds will arrange themselves in a certain way that they'll start to self-replicate. And then you got bacteria. And the bacteria have this kind of organic force that forces them to reproduce and to replicate. And these turn into simple organisms, into increasingly complex animals. And he saw this kind of chain of this organic force that kind of it forms a cross section through nature that pushes matter into increasing complexity until at some point it develops consciousness. But the same forces continue to push as we develop culture and religion and identify things of value and feel happy and sad. But this is all, and he conceptualized all these forces that kind of push nature through time to increasing complexity. He thought that this was the organic finger of God. So that's kind of how he conceptualized the whole of these forces that are kind of pushing matter forward through time.
Okay, so that's God's green thumb.
God's green thumb, quite.
He put us into where we are today. And are we happy?
And are we happy? Well, it depends on who you ask.
Does it?
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay.
But what I was going to get to was that when you said, oh, does it matter whether or not we really have no free will, whether or not everything is kind of on impulse? Herder's answer would be that everything you do is then basically the force of God pushing matter through time through you as a medium.
Okay.
So you're just an organism that's the result of this divine force pushing forward through time, and you get to continue it. And so everything you feel and do, it may not be your own, but it's actually the work of God pushing through time, pushing matter forward through time.
Okay. A lot of people, I think, have that basic belief. They
Yeah,
are
but
the arms and legs of God here on earth.
yes,
Here on earth, God's work must truly be our own, and et cetera, et cetera.
that's it. The interesting thing about Herder is he does it in a very almost rationalistic and biological way, which is quite interesting and unique. But so I think it's all about how you frame these things. And
Okay.
he doesn't always use the language of God either. It's really funny because he had this really funny take on first on an elephant, where he said that the flower doesn't know it, but the stomach of the elephant is a grave of thousands of flowers, and those flowers will gain new life through the intelligence of the elephant. And that's a really funny way of putting it. And then he had a funny way of putting falling in love. And he said that the lovers don't know it, but it's the very force of nature tricking them into falling in love in order for nature to continue to perpetuate itself through time. And so there's a lack of awareness of what's going on the part of the lovers, but nonetheless, they're happy. And nature does its thing. So it's quite interesting.
It's very interesting.
So I'm just wondering about what scientists have thought about timelines and the future, the past and present. Have they established that the future has happened and we just haven't gotten there yet? Or is that something that's not that they've agreed on yet? You know, kind of like the fate, destiny thing, kind of like whatever God has planned, that's what's planned. Are the scientists the same way where everything's kind of happened and it's going to happen?
So for scientists, in around the time that Herder was writing, a little bit after, there was a French scientist named Laplace. And he had a thought experiment called Laplace's demon, which he said, and demon older philosophers usually use the word demon to like think of like a super intelligence, but honestly, it's more accessible if we think of like a supercomputer or like a super AI system. So Laplace's demon is basically like, imagine we had like a super AI system, and we could feed the AI system the position and the velocity of every single particle of matter in the entire universe, which sounds impossible, but is theoretically possible. Say we feed this giant AI system the position and velocity of every chunk of matter. He thought that if we hit play on the computer, we would be able to play forward the entire history of the universe. Just from that, like, it's like taking a screenshot of the universe and using that screenshot to predict the entire movie.
And we know why he is wrong today.
And he is wrong today, interestingly enough. So that would be kind of what you're asking, is everything predictable? And
no,
he would say yes, but I think contemporary.
Yes, and I would say no. Anyone who has even a modicum of background in quantum physics is going to tell you no, because it's random. We cannot predict when anything is going to happen at the subatomic level, so that influences everything.
But then, Dad, here's an interesting twist in your tale. Before you were saying
I don't agree.
We don't have free will. But then there are leading neuroscientists who are putting forward the theory that maybe the reason the brain is so powerful is because basically the myelination on the axons acts as a sort of quantum computer. Basically, that individual neurons, the way they're structured, which is quite complicated, may actually make use of some randomness present at the quantum level in the way the brain operates, essentially.
It
So
might,
that
because
would
it
give
could have
us
evolved
free
to
will.
succeed
Oh, yeah,
because of
yeah,
it.
of course.
So that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it actually is capable of predicting or anticipating what the
No,
next quantum burst is going to be, but it could certainly be responsible for our creativity, our artistic endeavors.
which gives us free will. Because as we said,
Does it?
yes, because if Laplace's demon is
Not if we're
wrong,
controlled by those blasts of quantum physics that force us to do things that
well, it
we
means our
don't have
behavior
any
isn't fully
plans.
predictable by Laplace's demon.
Hmm.
So if our behavior isn't fully predictable, then there must be something that's capable of controlling the randomness in the situation.
Not
And if
necessarily.
your brain has evolved to capitalize off of that, who, except for your brain, would be doing
Okay,
accounting for that
we're
randomness of
looking at it from
behavior?
two different directions. I'm looking at it from the direction that this randomness has given humans an edge in a lot of different ways
Wait,
of
sorry, can
being
you
more
go back about
inventive.
10 seconds? It completely blacked out.
Okay. Oh, I'm
Okay, there we
sorry.
go. You're back. Yeah.
I'm back. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're back. Sorry.
And now I forgot what I was about to say. I think I was about to say that we're looking at this from two really different directions or perspectives. And mine is that this supposed myelination, quantum release is only giving us random thoughts and random ideas. It's making humans inventive and creative and artistic. And that's not necessarily meaning that it's free will. It just means that we have little sparks going off inside of us that say, oh, look what I just saw, that flash. You know, this is different from the direction that you were assuming, I think.
No, I think so too. I think the issue is whether or not we think there's ever a way to basically create a super Laplace demon that can account for the randomness in on the quantum level. And I would be inclined to say, I think probably.
Mhm. Okay.
Now,
Because I think probability is modelable.
I don't, but go ahead. But Zena, hi,
yeah,
but Zena, you're back.
yeah. Since we're on the topic of quantum mechanics or physics, or just quantum topics, either of the Mikshas, if you whichever would like to take it on, would you like to talk about the double slit experiment? Is there something, just like bring it up a little bit about the double slit experiment, or is
Well,
it?
it illustrates the randomness on the quantum level well, because basically what it means is if you have a photon, which is a single particle of light, and you shoot it at just a hole, it'll go straight through the hole and it will like hit the wall on the other side of the hole, right outside the hole. But then if you do the same experiment, except instead of having a hole, you take like a piece of cardboard and cut two tiny slits in it, the shadow that's going to be cast is not going to be in the shape of those two slits. It's instead going to be basically what looks like a ripple on the back wall. And what that means is that the way the photon passes through the slits is no longer like that of a particle, but instead that of a wave. And where an individual particle lands is basically random across a preset wave-like pattern. And so that shows the kind of randomness that's present on that level.
So sorry. So once the particle passed through the slit, it then transformed into a wave.
Yes. Yes.
And then before they put the cardboard, what were they? They were just shooting directly at the wall?
They were shooting it through, like, let's say a piece of cardboard that just has a hole in it.
Just a hole in it.
Yeah. And then it'll continue acting like a particle. But if you give it the two slits, it begins to act like a wave. And the way this ties into the conversation is that the wave-like pattern that the particle exhibits is governed by a sort of probability. about where the particle will land. And it's the same kind of governance by probability that we're talking about might occur in the human brain, which would give our behavior a degree of randomness and unpredictability that Laplace's demon, which is like this super AI system that could supposedly simulate all of physics, just couldn't account for. And the question is does that mean we have free will?
Absolutely not. That just proves that we don't. But let's move. Okay.
No, it's okay.
Like, if we were to hypothetically have the ability to analyze every single millisecond of society, wouldn't we be able to predict what's going to happen in the next millisecond?
It depends on whether or not there's a degree of randomness inherently present in human behavior, because our brain makes use of some sort of quantum level randomness, which is possible but not confirmed.
So it's a feature, not a bug.
It could be, because it could be adaptive.
What do you mean by that?
That if you have brains that do make use of this randomness, if they're more likely to survive and reproduce, then over time, brains with that element of randomness will take over. But if they don't have a higher likelihood of surviving and reproducing because of that element of randomness in the brains, then it'll just kind of die out. Like, it won't be adaptive.
So you're saying quantum physics is evolved into us?
It's possible. If quantum physics were playing a role in the way the brain makes decisions, then it would have been evolved into us, yes.
Right. It's not possible to be like animals don't exhibit quantum like
Animals probably would as well.
Okay.
And that's
you don't
another
have to have
question
a
to figure out.
And why don't
Yeah.
we circle back to the smallest of all the animals, the very tiniest of any animal, the honeybee, or bees in general? We only have about 15 minutes left here, and we've been giving those followers of our bee podcast some really good background to build up to the story or the idea. Do bees experience happiness?
So I guess maybe where I'd start on that is with Descartes, who's kind of the founder of modern philosophy. He was a French dude who's also a mathematician. He's where we get the Cartesian plane from. But he thought that animals, all animals, including bees, were basically automata. He thought that they were essentially just biological machines, is the word that he used. Except humans he thought were fundamentally different. He thought that humans had souls, and the souls were essentially implanted in us by God.
Okay.
And what was really interesting is he thought that the reason all animals, including monkeys, dogs, dolphins, the reason he thought that none of them had souls, none of them had any rational capabilities, and that they were all biological machines, is because he thought that, and this is his reasoning, I'm not kidding, it's perhaps his worst moment, is he thought that if God gave dogs, dolphins, elephants, and chimpanzees souls,
you get a soul, and you get a soul,
exactly.
And you get a soul, and you get a car. Okay, go ahead.
He thought it would make the rest of the animals jealous. And he said, because it's very unlikely.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. If God selected a handful of animals, like the higher animals, so elephants, dolphins, dogs, monkeys, if God decided to give the higher animals souls, it would make the lower animals jealous. And he said, because it's very unlikely that a barnacle has a soul, we know that chimpanzees and elephants don't have souls and that they're just machines.
Wow, that's quite a leap. Plus, he's assuming that the barnacle can actually become jealous.
Essentially, yeah. Although it's not really that it would be jealous. He said that God would always treat the animal kingdom the same. Was his argument. Okay. So that's a pretty poor argument. So from his perspective, bees would not feel happy.
Are humans kind of obsessing over this concept of a soul that has never been proven?
I think humans have come up with the word soul to describe the fact that we're self-conscious, that we are conscious, that we're conscious of ourselves. They said, what is this thing, or what is this phenomenon of self-consciousness? To make it easier to talk about, we're going to call it a soul.
Yeah, okay. But I need to jump in here again with a little bit of contrarianness. That's your way. That's some humans see the soul as being the definition of our consciousness and our, but there are a lot of very primitive people who believe that, as soon as you pass away, this soul migrates out of your body and lifts up towards the clouds, towards heaven, and then settles in with a whole bunch of other souls up there.
Well, even Plato thought very similar things.
And what a primitive Plato.
What a primitive Plato. But the idea there would be that, and even a lot of later German philosophers had this kind of idea that your self-consciousness is a single instantiation of a broader kind of world soul or world consciousness. And so, and for Hegel, we're working on Hegel in class right now. The idea is that the world is, remember how I said that like Herder had this idea that kind of there's a force in nature that's pushing matter towards increasing complexity, and that gives rise to emotions and feelings. Very roughly speaking, Hegel kind of continues that, and he says that the world is essentially moving towards a state of absolute spirit, where all matter kind of bleeds away and spirit kind of opens up over the world. And so he thought that when we're self-conscious, we come to the realization that we ourselves are instantiations of basically a broader spirit of nature. In the same way that we come to the realization that we as physical things are just instantiations of the physical world, we realize that our feelings and emotions are just single instantiations of, I guess, the concept of feeling itself.
That's very interesting. I don't know. The soul has been such a debated topic since the time that since I've been able to think. This has been everybody's discussion. Does it exist? I don't know. We haven't proved it, from what I understand. There's no proof of it, right?
Well, it depends on what you mean by a soul. Because if you mean a physical thing that kind of inhabits in you, then there's no proof of it, nor will there be. Some people will say, is the soul perhaps an epiphenomenon of mental activity? You could translate it as saying, is consciousness an epiphenomenon of mental activity? And that is something you can test or prove.
Well, what about the electrical current that a living organism exhibits? What is that?
Well, the question is whether or not the electrical current is conscious. And
the
point is, it's
sorry, go ahead.
No, it would be the electrical current is not conscious. It's a certain arrangement of electrical currents in matter in a very particular way that somehow is at least correlated with consciousness. But that's not to say that the electrical current itself is conscious or a soul.
Right, but you could now use the analogy of a light bulb where, if it's plugged into the wall and the circuit is enclosed, like until the circuit is enclosed, the light bulb is not going to light up. So is the what's lit up? Is it the electricity or the light bulb?
Yeah, well, it's the light bulb that's lit up. But in the same way, it's the electricity is not in itself the light. It's the electricity plus a particular arrangement of matter, the light bulb, that produces the light.
So extrapolating from that, I don't know if I use that.
Yeah, no.
But like human, the light bulb, electricity combines, and you get a soul, a spirit, a lit up until it's turned off. And that electricity still exists, and it didn't go anywhere. It's still there in the universe until the circuit becomes closed again.
So it's like the potential to bring more souls into being always exists while there are souls.
Well, from that perspective, yes, exactly. Because we can always give birth to another soul if there's two souls,
Yeah.
two particles, two creating friction, like fusion or whatever.
I love it, but what about bees?
Yeah. Well,
What about
bees are like exactly. What are boot bees? We should be saying a boot bees.
Yes, we should.
a Boot Bees podcast?
A
That would be good.
with an A at the end. Okay,
But no,
please.
what I want to maybe get to is then kind of to refocus on self-consciousness and what makes us happy. And I think what's really interesting about humans who are self-conscious is that we are not only aware of what's going on directly around us, like we're not only aware of our environment, and all animals, including bees, are aware of their immediate sense environment. They can kind of tell that, they can respond to things in their visual field, they can respond to things in their audio field. So they have an awareness, in a sense, of maybe a very primitive awareness of their immediate environment, and we are too. But what seems to make humans special is not only that we have an awareness of our immediate environment, we have an awareness of counterfactual realities. And counterfactual realities sounds really like a fancy term, but basically it means is that, like, to illustrate, like, I'm currently aware that I am sitting in my room in Montreal on a Zoom call, but I'm also aware that I could be sitting on a beach in Mexico drinking a beer. So I have an awareness that things could be another way. So I'm aware of my reality, and I'm aware that there's a reality that could be different. And I think what's quite interesting is that animals can only respond to the environment that's directly around them, and they can respond in really complex ways. But what gives humans an edge, intellectually, and also, I believe, gives rise to self-consciousness, is our awareness not only of our immediate environment and our ability to respond to it in a really complex way, but our awareness as well that, but our environment could look different. And so I think after a degree in philosophy, that essentially what happiness is an awareness that our environment and the best possible counterfactual environment that we can imagine are either the same or moving closer together. And so I think if we want to look at, can bees feel happiness, I think they can get a rush of dopamine or serotonin when they find something of value in their environment, or move closer to something of value in their environment, because nature is basically compelling it to act this way to survive. A bee will never have an awareness that its current environment could look different. It won't have a conscious awareness that its current environment could look different. And so it could never have that feeling of our environment and the best possible counterfactual environment are coming close together or are the same.
I got it. I think I like that. I'm thinking, like what would be an unhappy bee, like a bee that's soaked in cold and its colony is dying. If we were human, well, which we are, I guess we are human. We as humans would want to anthropomorphize the bee and say, oh, they must not be happy. But what you're telling me, and which I think sounds quite plausible, is that the bee can't imagine anything different. Now, it will try to remove itself from a bad situation. If it's fallen into a jar of water, it's trying to find its way out of it, because it's basically that's the way bees have
It's
evolved.
pure instinct for survival.
It's instinct. It's instinct for survival, but that doesn't mean I'm not happy here. I think I'll go somewhere else because I could picture a much nicer place.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think
Now,
that's really what makes us happy is having an imagined vision of what the world could look like at its finest, and realizing that the way the world actually looks right now is moving closer to that.
now I realize you need to get off to a lecture here really
I will
soon.
have to get going soon, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay, I do want
just have one last thing to ask Daniel. So,
Yeah.
not maybe this is too simplifying it, but at its rawest form, are animals, including humans, are we just collection of different survival instincts?
At its rawest form, yes. But that doesn't mean that these aren't incredibly complex survival instincts.
And this leads really nicely into something I was about to say when Bidzina joined us about half an hour ago. I was just about to ask for another take on this whole issue, and I was thinking of Maslow's pyramid with respect to bees, because if a bee can have all of its physiological needs taken care of, and then it moves up into a level where happiness can actually exist. It's the psychological, but so if a bee has everything going well, even if it can't think of a contrafactual situation that it might prefer, it has all of its basic needs satisfied. Would we be able to say the bee is now happy?
Yes, but in a very different way than we understand happiness. It would almost be
Okay.
wrong to call it happy,
Oh, okay.
I think.
Okay. Mhm.
Like, yeah. I think
All
the
right.
way sometimes because we're so used to being human, the language we use to describe human emotions simply can't translate well to
Right.
look at
Right.
other
I am
creatures.
used to being human. I mean, it's a
I
flaw.
know.
I know it's a
It
bug in the
really
system,
is.
not a feature, not a feature, just a bug. Um, okay. Well, this has been really good. I do want to let you go, but Zena and I may chat for just a few more minutes, to kind of see if we remember anything that you taught us here. I do want to just reiterate how happy I am that you're going to be doing a master's at the University of British Columbia in the I guess we could say it would be the um, philosophical grounds or basis for journalism in 18th century Germany.
Wow.
No. No, I'm
Oh,
going to be doing a master's in journalism, and I will get to pick a thesis topic, which is very exciting. But
okay.
we'll see what that will be. It probably won't be the philosophical foundations of information exchange in 18th century Germany, but
That
Why
is
not?
incredible news. I honestly that is like you might be the only person in my life that I've heard that's doing journalism, and
thank you.
we need journalism. It's
Yeah,
the world is literally have turned upside down because we don't have proper journalists.
I agree. So that's why I want to get in there.
Wow. And
So
in the master's program too, that's like
yeah.
how even like rare is that?
No, I'm excited. So it's
Hmm.
gonna be good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for
Well,
having me.
yeah, good luck with your last couple of weeks there at McGill. And I hope
Thanks so
everything goes
much.
well. Your last
Last three
three
lectures.
lectures. Yes. And one
Well,
of them
last three
is
days of lecture, but yeah.
last 3 days of lectures. And one
Yeah.
of those lectures is in half an hour or less.
I have to pick something up and then yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you for joining us. It's really
all right.
nice.
Thank you.
Appreciate it a lot. And bye-bye.
Hope we can do
See
another
you.
one. This time I'll
Yeah, we will. We'll have
Hmm.
to. All right.
Hmm.
See you.
Okay. Well, that was great. That was really interesting. I didn't follow a lot of what was said. You missed a big chunk of it, but about
I
half an
did.
hour. But you can pick that up because it's recorded.
Yeah, no,
So,
honestly, I just completely flew over my head, but I pulled an all-nighter. Like we have a final client presentation today
ooh,
and another assignment that's due in another class afterwards that I was working on, and I don't know, everything just got
oh,
all
you
blurred.
better get moving too then.
Yeah,
So
I should.
today's topic of can bees be happy or something like that? It really wasn't covered in very much detail, but it was still a fascinating subject. The whole thing about how we think and how we feel and everything from souls to processing feelings and the randomness of nature. It was all good.
Yeah, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs that you brought up, that is very true. It can be applied to, it doesn't have to be just applied to humans. And when you think about it in terms of bees, yeah, like if they have their food taken care of, if they have their security taken care of, If they have a family, friends and family, they have a good enough population, then in theory, then they shouldn't, they should be on that higher stage of the hierarchy. So they should be at least, maybe not all bee, but that beehive is happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that top level, I don't remember exactly, maybe you do, but the very pinnacle is something like self-actuation and self-awareness and that sort of thing that is goes beyond psychological needs being met. Is that right? Do you remember?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. So it's food, security, shelter, and then friends and or like friends and family, and then ego. There's 5 of them, and then the number 1 is the self-actualization, which is something that's greater than yourself. A legacy. That there's a Jewish proverb that every man should build a house, plant a tree, and have a kid, because all those 3 things will outlive you.
Yes.
So it's eventually, essentially, like if we can all somehow get up the ladder where we meet all of our needs, we should be all striving to leave a legacy behind that will better humanity.
Right. And we can't imagine that bees, for example, are capable of seeing it in that term. They are building their wax house for the future. It's a legacy, but it's not an intentional legacy. It's not based on a proverb. It's not based on thought. It's based on what instinctually will allow future generations to survive.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And that's kind of going back to what Daniel said, that, including humans, we're a collection of kind of survival instincts. And my brother-in-law, we kind of got into an argument over this, because I told him that love is just our desire to procreate and pass on our genes and nothing more. And then now, it is. So it is a little bit more complex than just a simple survival mechanism. But yeah, the bees don't really know that they're building a legacy, but they for sure are building a legacy. Yeah.
Yes, they are. Yes. Well, we're going to go because I don't want to hold you up. I appreciate that you were able to come in. You probably could have just told me that, Ron, I just can't do it today, and that would have been okay. But I like having you. You're the co-host. It's good to have you as part of this. So do you want to take us home?
Yes, everyone. Thank you for listening. Join us next week for a fresh episode about bees, culture, and curiosity. I should say about bees from now on, since it's season 4. Yeah.
Hey.
Bees, eh?
Bye, everybody. It's been great. Thank you for listening.